Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, throughout the 2 terms of the Obama regime, we've noticed an unprecedented use of executive orders and actions to subvert the will of the people's representatives. Now, as we all know, pursuant to the clear and concise language contained within the 4 corners of the Constitution, the people's representatives are the legislative branch of government. As created by Article 1, the legislature is composed of the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Together, they form Congress. They are the representatives of the people. They are designed to carry out and enact the laws of the land, and the president's job is to faithfully execute those laws, or to sign them into effect or veto them. Those are the limited scopes of powers via the enumerated powers by the concise language of the Constitution. It's something that Obama has ignored with greater rapidity and regularity throughout his campaign as the days march on. Nevertheless, he has done this because he knows he cannot garner the support of the legislature for his attempts to drastically, dare I say, fundamentally transform the proper scope and application of government. To say this is extra-constitutional is beyond an understatement. It clearly represents an intent to operate outside the supreme law of the land, which, as stated on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is the Constitution itself. Folks, this again proves that President Obama does indeed know what he's doing, and that it's directly contradictory to the clear and concise language of our Constitution. Now, before we dig into Obama's latest attempt to subvert the Constitution, I think it's important that we define despotism. You notice that I use the term despotism within the title of today's Solo Flight Special edition of our program. The reason I did is going to become readily apparent when we define it and apply it to the actions of this current president. Traditionally, despotism has 2 definitions. 1, the exercise of absolute power, especially in a cruel and oppressive way, and 2, a country's political system where the ruler holds absolute power. From this, we can see that the president's actions satisfy both of the traditional definitions of despotism. It's something that we should keep in mind whenever we think of proffering solutions to this executive misconduct, which, as I just stated, has run rampant throughout these disastrous 2 terms of the Obama regime. He has basically taken it upon himself to become a potentate. He thinks of himself as an emperor, and he cannot deign himself to such a level as to allow himself to be bound by the scriptures of our Constitution. Now, what is this latest action of which I'm speaking? Well, Obama has targeted companies which seek lower taxes abroad or to merge with other companies, particularly foreign companies, in order to avoid the ludicrous tax burden that exists with the American tax rate. When you look at the American corporate tax rate, you begin to notice that it is the highest of the established world, or of the industrialized world, of the free world. And it's a major drain on our economy. Obama understands this, he just doesn't care. You see, America's economic and fiscal might has come about due to a free market system. In other words, people of all walks of life have been free to establish businesses as they see fit and to serve the market. If their product or service failed to deliver as promised, it was and should be the market that determines the fate of their business. That just speaks to common sense. If a product fails to deliver, you're not going to buy from that company again, because that company will then have a proven track record. Word of mouth will get out, and free market forces will step in to correct the problem that is arising from this failed product and company. That just speaks to common sense. Well, what this spells out is classic capitalism, and it has been a solid bedrock of American enterprise since the inception of our republic. Unfortunately, greedy politicians have decided that they want to change the scope of America's economic and political system. They want to have a greater say and thereby be able to skim off the top while over-regulating the economy. This is the sort of madness that was conjured up by British economist John Maynard Keynes. We've done an episode in the past where we explored the twisted machinations of this closeted Fabian socialist. According to Zygmunt Dobbs, this was the goal of Keynesian economics, to plant the seeds of Fabian socialists in this great representative republic of ours. They wanted to fundamentally transform the destiny of this great free nation and to rewrite our history. They have been working tirelessly at this effort for well over a century, and we are starting to see their wicked fruit come to fruition. So, what these politicians are actually doing is illicitly amassing power unto themselves at the great expense of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. This new executive action by President Obama ostensibly claims to shutter tax loopholes on companies incorporating abroad to escape high corporate tax rates in the U.S. That might appear laudable on the surface, but truth be told, it's another unwarranted power grab by the executive branch of government. Remember that pursuant to the United States Constitution, in order for any branch of the federal government to take any legitimate or rightful action, it must trace that action back to a power expressly enumerated to it by the Constitution. The executive branch has its powers enumerated to it via Article 2. Remember, Article 1 devises the legislature, Article 2 devises the executive branch of government, and Article 3 devises the judiciary. That is the way that our founding fathers intended for our country to operate. They expected these three branches of government to exercise their specific tasks and not to cross over into the jurisdictional territory of the other independent branches of government. That was a safety valve included within the construction of our republic to ensure that not one branch of government nor one individual could amass the powers of a despot into itself. You see, they inherently distrusted centralized authority. Going back to the American War of Independence, we see that the United States founding fathers looked upon the centralized power of the Crown of England, with whom they spent that long, drawn-out and bloody campaign fighting and attempting to wrest their independence from as an inherently wicked thing. They didn't trust central authority. They thought that it was the most wicked thing, and that it would surely move to erode the fundamental and inalienable rights of the popular sovereigns. That's an understandable situation and belief, and it makes sense as to why our founding fathers would have felt that way. As we can see, throughout the scope of the history of America, the government has consistently moved in a way to illicitly amass greater power unto itself at the expense of the true popular sovereigns. It is a state of nature of government that it diametrically opposes the will of the true sovereigns. That is something that must be addressed. Of course, the best way to address it has been with us since the inception of this country over 230 years ago. That key, as we have stated many times on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, is none other than the United States Constitution. So, we see then that what President Obama is attempting to do here is subvert the powers that were expressly enumerated to the legislature and exceed the powers that were expressly enumerated to him via Article 2. Article 2 does not grant the president the authority to regulate either interstate or international commerce. That is just the truth of the matter. It's something that no matter what sort of flowery language that Obama's teleprompter may provide him, cannot be escaped. He will do anything in his power to expand his power. That is the shocking reality that has become the true legacy of this disastrous Obama regime. He has done it without any hesitation, and he does it without a care in the world. It shows to the great depths of which his depravity is really going. And it also shows that he truly loathes and despises the American people and the republic which is supposed to represent their values, concerns, hopes, dreams, and aspirations. That, too, is problematic and something which should not be ignored. What we see with the power of the legislature pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution is that they are the sole branch of government which are entrusted with the power of regulating commerce. Generally speaking, this goes to the heart of the doctrine of separations of power. Again, that integral part of our Republican system of government is something which Obama loathes and despises. Of course, that raises the serious question of why. Why does Obama, who claims to be a constitutional scholar, despise every aspect of that sacred document's edicts with respect to power? It's because Obama does not adhere to a philosophy which is compatible with that of our Republican form of government. Obama is a strict adherent to the Fabian socialist doctrine, which in and of itself would work against the express intent of the Constitution, and therefore it would also be violative of the supreme law of the land. In order to fully analyze this, we have to explain that the Fabian socialists believe in the sovereign rights of government. That is, the rights of the majority. That is the true characteristic spirit of a so-called democratic socialist system. But the problem is that our system is a republic. Our system was devised in such a way as to expressly recognize the sovereign rights of the popular sovereign, meaning each individual accordingly. Our system was designed in such a way as to limit the impact and prevent the creation or establishment of a so-called tyranny of the majority. Remember that Benjamin Franklin defined this term, democracy, as two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. As you can see, that unfortunate sheep in the hypothetical will meet a disastrous end each and every time. So, Obama seeks to subvert the authority of Congress, the true representatives of the people, to seek his policy goal of harming the American economy. Again, folks, there is no way that this could be said to be unintentional. He has been in office for 7+ years and has worked incessantly towards this goal of tearing America apart. Why? Well, when you recall that the purpose of any socialistic form of government is to replace the existing system of government, it must, in order to claim any viability, destroy that which came before. The Fabians are the ones that devised the notion of using a system against itself, then to plant the seeds of their incremental steps towards adoption of socialism on a grand scale. Of course, nothing could be more detrimental for this country than that, but that is their true twisted design. And it is something that has been worked at now for well over a century. Needless to say, Obama's actions are a direct violation of the Constitution. Predictably, due to the fact that he is a Fabian socialist, Obama simply doesn't care. What are the true goals of the Obama regime with this new executive action? Well, ultimately, it's to stop pending mergers of American companies and foreign companies to avoid the ludicrous tax rate in the United States. Think of companies like Pfizer trying to merge with the Irish company Allergan. Obama wants to put a stop to this. He needs that steady flow of income because he has allowed governmental spending to go completely out of control at a rate of which this nation has never seen before throughout its entire history. Congress, however, is the only government entity that has the authority to enact such a law, or indeed any law. The president could sign it into law or veto it. The problem is Congress chose, rightly I might add, not to implement such a law. This sort of backhanded protectionism always comes back to harm American consumers and businesses. The reason that the United States isn't nearly as competitive as it used to be is the draconian corporate tax rate, which is the highest in the developed world. We all suffer as a direct result of the policies implemented by the Fabian socialists, who couch their twisted agenda in feel-good terms like progressivism. Who would ever be opposed to progress? Yet you see that their progress is not really rooted in the best interests of the popular sovereigns. They are a new age form of feudalism. As Alexander de Tocqueville said, this draws from their inherent desire to fundamentally micromanage the daily facets of our lives. That means that they wish to control our every thought and action from cradle until grave. Such a system merely spreads misery for everyone. That is the only way in which it is truly egalitarian. That's not in the spirit of our founding fathers, nor does it represent the true will and desires, hopes, aspirations, or dreams of the American people. Nevertheless, these Fabian socialists are hell-bent on carrying out their twisted machinations, and President Obama's attempt here to foist another fraudulent executive action onto the American people is proof positive of just that fact. As always, the devil is in the detail. What they're pushing forward is the progress of a poison, a toxin, to destroy the American system of polity. That has been their goal all along. So why would the president seek to force American companies to bend to his will? The most basic explanation is greed. You know, folks, you cannot separate greed from the private sector and that of the quote-unquote public sector. The fact of the matter is, the public sector is full of ambitious people who are greedy. Obama is greedy. Look at the way that he flaunts flying around in 2 separate planes when one would suffice, the wasteful spending that he does, the lavish parties that he does, the numerous trips to the most expensive golf resorts, all on the dime of the American taxpayer. These are the undeniable realities which we awaken to every morning. It's what makes spending so out of control. Add on top of this the type of entitlement thinking that has taken root in this country as a direct result of the failed policies of this administration, and we see the mind-numbing problems that currently face us. These things are an inherent flaw. But it's more than just an inherent flaw. This is a design to help overpower the true structure of the American system of polity in order to further depress the people to the point of where they throw their hands in the air and turn to the government and bend on their knees begging for some form of absolution and salvation to be proffered unto them by the very source of the problem in the first place. That is the twisted, dark reality of government. It also explains why government is never working in the best interest of the American people. Or at least the government has not been working in the best interest of the American people for a very long time. These sorts of realities are sickening and disgusting. It shows the grotesque extent to which the Fabian socialists have managed to poison the hearts, souls, and minds of the American people. And it also explains why there is a great sentiment of growing anger within the American populace. It is because these people are living the life of nobles, while ignoring the true plight of the absolute and ultimate wielders of sovereignty. Everything has been turned backwards and upside down in this once great republic of ours. And it shows no signs of improving at any time in the foreseeable future. That is what is leading to the type of revolutionary sentiment that we are seeing come out of the electorates of both political parties. On the left, they're rebelling because they think that the measures of the Obama regime simply have not gone far enough, has not moved the goal lines fast enough towards their ultimate goal of socialism for their liking. On the side of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, and fanned by the reckless coverage of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, we see that the GOP electorate is feeling abandoned, lied to, and betrayed. Once again, I can't blame the electorate for feeling that way. We can clearly look to the results of the 2014 midterm elections and see that none of the verbose and grandiose promises that were made by the entering congressional class have been fulfilled. They have been derelict in their duty, and they have spread this anger that's threatening to consume not only the Republican Party, but the entire body politic of the United States of America. It is a staggering reality that cannot be ignored. Yet that's exactly what the salivating mainstream media is attempting to do. They're attempting to weave their web of lies and deceit in such a way as to pit American citizen against American citizen, and this is being fulfilled by the candidacy of Donald J. Trump. Of course, we will get into that in further detail a little bit later as the program goes on. I want to still focus on what Obama is attempting to do here with the executive order. He is basically trying to say that government can tell all business entities exactly what they can and cannot do. He is trying to say that everything must be based on a command economy style system. Folks, that's more akin to a communist potentate or a communist despotism than it is a true representative Republican system of government as that in the United States of America. That's the truth that we must come to terms with respect to this disastrous Obama regime. It has been, from its very inception, opposed to the great will, hopes, dreams, and aspirations of the American people. It has made this nation a mere shell of itself. That is what lends credence to the shallow, hollow, empty, and meaningless platitude foisted upon us by the Trump camp of Make America Great Again. Yet, as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have cautioned you on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, it's important that we recall that the true essence of America never stopped being great. The things that we have seen foisted upon us are alien and foreign to the true American psyche. It is out of step with, contradictory to, the true inherent spirit of the American people as epitomized by our shared Constitution. That is the reality that is being ignored. That is what the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are attempting to sweep under the rug. All the while, they're hoping that you, the American people, are so caught up in the mundane task of merely surviving in an overzealously regulated system that you fail to notice that your rights and liberties are being stripped from you by this egomaniacal potentate who currently wields the reins of political power in the United States. It's a tragic turn of events, something that George Washington attempted to warn us about in his farewell address. He said, quite poignantly I might add, that if we allowed ourselves to get caught up in the bitter divisions of factionalism, we would lose the greater picture. Now, that greater picture is none other than our Constitution and the proper scope and application of government that is mandated by its language. This is not to say that the Constitution is this flawless document. No, but what it is to say is when you look at Article 5 and the way that we are allowed to amend the Constitution, it is the closest thing to perfection that we will ever get. It is the closest thing to a truly harmonious type of government that has ever been devised by the hands of man. And the reason being is that it is divinely inspired by Providence itself. You see, we're not taught that anymore, due to the twisted machinations of historical revisionists who have infiltrated the institutions of education all throughout this land. They are working to poison the minds of the up-and-coming generations with this sort of twisted, false history. Even when I was in college a decade ago, my history teachers professors tried to teach that our country was founded upon divisiveness, hatred, slavery, sexism, what have you. That's an erroneous approach, because the true and laudable scope and nature of our representative Republican form of government is based on natural law tenets, which are, by their very nature, timeless. They are timeless because they are based on the natural law. In other words, the scriptures of our government are just as applicable today as they were 200 years ago, as God willing they will be 200 years from now. That, too, is one of the truths that they have attempted to obfuscate. Recall when President Obama stood before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and said that the United States of America is inherently racism, that racism is a part of our DNA, and therefore we will never be able to correct the mistakes of the past. What a ludicrous statement! It's absolutely absurd in its scope and application, and it is insulting to the intelligence of the body politic of the United States and the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. It shows that he wants to wield absolute authority. Obama seeks the power of a despot. He wishes to unleash his brand of despotism upon the United States, and he is willing to do anything and everything at his disposal to achieve that goal. Of course, such a goal is diametrically opposed to the system of freedom, to the type of government that the United States was designed to be. That is a shocking reality. But you're not going to hear that from most other sources of information out there. But again, folks, I don't want you to take what I'm saying at face value. I want you to go out and look into this yourself, to see whether what I'm saying lines up with what you believe and what the facts state. In that sense, what I really want is to empower you. That has been the goal since our first episode, which aired on September 11th, 2015. We want you to embrace the power that is yours by right of birth. That is something that should be refreshing to hear, something that we all should desire to hear, because it's certainly something we have not heard over at least the last 60 years. So, going back to Obama's twisted desires here with this most recent executive action. Why would the president seek to force American companies to bend to his will? Again, greed. There can be no question that the government is out of control in its spending. Our national debt is beyond belief. It's crippling our businesses and weakening our economy. This sort of conduct is not dissimilar to the ambition of medieval kings. History serves as a great teacher here. In a past episode where I explained the development and evolution of popular sovereignty, I mentioned the progenitor of constitutional government, Magna Carta, or the Great Charter. Magna Carta arose in response to John Plantagenet, King John I, placing exorbitant taxes on the English baronage. The barons decided that the king did not have absolute authority to tax them. This was the beginning of the notion that taxation could not occur without the consent of the people. Of course, at that time, it was restricted to the baronage, but as I explained in that episode, it evolved ultimately to the form that our founding fathers had. And that was the spirit that gave birth to the United States. The notion of no taxation without representation is the direct descendant of the mindset that gave us Magna Carta. Government by consent is a central pillar of American polity. Yet Obama despises this time-honored and well-established tradition of constitutional government. Recall that he exclaimed to students that he was giving their commencement address to that they should reject the voices warning of governmental tyranny. You know, it's such a bizarre statement that I think it's important to hear it from the lips of the man himself. So I'm going to key up that soundbite right now.
We, the people, chose to do these things together because we know this country cannot accomplish great things if we pursue nothing greater than our own individual ambition. Unfortunately, you've grown up hearing voices that incessantly warn of government as nothing more than some separate, sinister entity that's at the root of all our problems. Some of these same voices also do their best to gum up the works. They'll warn that tyranny is always lurking just around the corner. You should reject these voices.
Listen to the condescension that's in his tone of voice as he explains that it is a bad thing to basically despise tyranny. Listen as he embraces the type of totalitarianism that has been espoused by tyrants and despots for eons. That is the stark reality. It proves once and for all that Barack Hussein Obama does not care about limited government. In fact, he thinks that government is the only solution for all of the problems that might face a nation. What he doesn't realize is that it creates the problems. Actually, I think he is fully aware of that fact. I think he doesn't care. He sees himself as this new type of absolutist monarch. He sees himself as a new nobility which will command and control the American people with the dominating iron fist of oppression. This is not something that should be painted in a different light. This is from his own mouth. It is the very message that he was purveying to the up-and-coming generation. He is making it seem as though that is the type of mentality that is a part of the American psyche, when truth be told, it is the exact opposite of what is at the heart and soul of the American people. It shows that he believes that government can solve everything, and that only government should have the right to act. Yet the problem with that twisted line of thinking is that governments do not, by their nature, have rights. Rights belong instinctively to the people. That is the way that our nation was founded, and that is not the sort of fundamental transformation which we will be willing to allow to occur within this great representative republic of ours. It is diametrically opposed to every fiber that has made America great. It is a truly wicked and evil thing. And the executive action that he is attempting to cram down our throats again, thereby attacking our businesses, thereby once again incessantly stripping our fundamental and inalienable rights endowed to us by our Creator away from us, he shows that he is acting in an extra-constitutional and indeed an illegal fashion. Folks, I'm not making this stuff up. And you can't make this type of garbage up. It is the inherent doctrine of which the radical frothing at the mouth left always engages in. Now, they attempt to hide it because they know that it is morally and intellectually repugnant to the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. They want to dupe you, and ultimately they think you're not very intelligent. That explains the flames of anger that have been agitated throughout the United States. And it shows that he warns to ignore the voices of our founders. What we see from all of this is that Obama wants us to ignore the very voices that led to the inception, the birth, the creation of this great representative republic of ours. When he says that racism is a part of our DNA and not liberty, or the resistance to despotism, he's really projecting his own twisted and immoral views on the nation at large. This is why Obama is an embarrassment to the country as a whole. Remember when he said there was nothing exceptional about the establishment of America? That's a repeat of his hatred of our nation. I think that the way Obama has sought to operate outside of his rightful delegated authority, and the pathetic response that has been offered by the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has led to the outbreak of anger that's dominated the 2016 presidential election cycle. Who can blame the American people for being angry? They're watching their country be annihilated by weak, incompetent, and feckless so-called leaders. It comes down to a sense of betrayal. We all feel as though the supposed leadership of this country has lied to us and ultimately betrayed us. Yet, folks, it would be a mistake of biblical proportions to cast this aspersion on every politician. Ted Cruz, for example, has fought this, as has Senator Mike Lee of Utah. However, the anger of the people has blinded them to this undeniable reality. Remember, we must be cognizant of the deception that the Fabian socialists always engage in. They work in deception. In fact, if you recall that their original iconography, going back to the group that was established in 19th century Great Britain, that of a wolf's in sheep's clothing, clearly explains what their twisted goals and machinations are. They work without pause, without rest, towards achieving a goal of redefining American polity in such a way that is both foreign, alien, and incompatible with the natural law tenets of our Constitution. They seek to deprive us of our liberty because inherently deep down in their heart of hearts, they distrust us. They loathe and despise us. They do not think that we are capable of ruling ourselves. How insulting. There really is no other way to describe that than as insulting. They are insulting our intelligence, they're insulting our character, they're insulting our identity, and they are pitting us one against another. And all for the purpose of dividing and conquering. Make no mistake about it, folks, this is all by design. This is by the design of those nefarious Fabian socialists who have been working at least for the past 100 years towards tearing this country apart at the seams. They seek to weaken and then ultimately destroy the societal fabric of this great republic. You can see it in the way that they loosely throw around this erroneous claim that the United States is a democracy. Folks, we never have, and God willing, never will be a democracy. A democracy allows for a despotism all its own. Look to history again, and you will see that in Athens, a true direct democracy gave way to tyrants and despots. Why? Because of the way that it only acknowledged the right of the majority. Now, where is this best shown? Well, recall the great philosopher Socrates, who was teaching up-and-coming generations. They said that he was polluting the minds of the up-and-coming generations against their gods. They called him before a trial of the assembly, forced him to testify, and when they couldn't get him to do what they wanted, they sentenced him to kill himself by drinking poison hemlock. This was the action of a majority vote. But you notice that it deprived, without true due process under the law, the fundamental and inalienable rights of Socrates himself. You see, folks, once again, history is a great teacher. It provides us with the warnings of the past so that we can learn from those warnings and prevent them from repeating themselves throughout the course of human events. That's why that old adage comes up time and again. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Well, we are about to repeat some of the mistakes of the past. Ultimately, what we see is that despotism arouses the desire to burn the entire system. There is no denying that the despotism of Obama has created this desire to burn down the entire system. It also explains why, up until recently, New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian Donald J. Trump, aka John Barron, aka John Miller, has seemingly been unstoppable. Again, however, history provides an ample lesson as to why this approach is dangerous, leading to the nation reaping the bitter seeds of unintended consequences. Now I turn to contemporary history of England. Back in 1653, the English plunged themselves into a bitter, drawn-out civil war. It was in response to the extravagance of the Stuart king, that is, the Scottish line of kings that rose to prominence after the death of the last Tudor, Queen Elizabeth I, the Stuart king Charles I. Charles claimed that he had the divine right of God to rule as an absolute monarch. His forces, however, were vanquished on the battlefield, and Oliver Cromwell, a prominent middle gentry military commander, who set about replacing the monarchy with what contemporaries hoped would be a republic, except this new government was called the Protectorate, and Cromwell assumed the title of Lord Protector. The problem was, it soon developed into an even more repressive despotism than the monarchy had been. The Rump Parliament, as it had been known, had allowed England to plunge into anarchy, and the realm was then thrust into a 5-year period of perpetual incessant war. All of this being the direct result of blind rage, attempting to cast aspersions on the entire political class. Now, granted, the English system at the time would not be acceptable to our American minds, but it shows that if you are reckless and allow yourself to be completely consumed by the flames of blind rage, you reap unintended consequences. In many senses, Donald Trump reflects the haughty characteristics exhibited by Cromwell. Cromwell was very full of himself, thought that he could do no wrong, thought that he and he alone had the power to save the country. But he did it in such a way as to convince the people that he would do it through their rule, that he was doing it for their benefits and for their betterment. Yet nothing could be further from the truth, because what he engaged in required even greater expenditures, required even greater centralized control on the part of the government. History shows that Cromwell resorted to kingly power to restore order. Cromwell could only maintain order by retaining to the same, or rather returning to the same sort of despotism he swore to be intrinsically against. He needed money to fund the incessant conflicts that cropped up throughout the realm. You know, the Irish and the Scottish didn't want to bend to their will to this new autocrat. They still retained, in some small order, their own nobility, and in Scotland, their kingship. And of course, what really irked the Scots is that the Stuart line was their kings first and foremost. Therefore, they saw this upstart, this middle gentry sort, a yeoman by any other name, rising in prominence and attempting to redefine the United Kingdom's polity as something of a form of tyranny. But more than tyranny, it was a form of treason. And they were going to fight to put him down. Of course, they struggled and lost in many, many cases. And ultimately, upon the death of Cromwell, the nobility invited the return of Charles II. And the kingdom was restored to that of another one who vowed to rule more in a constitutional monarchy form than that of an absolute despot. Ultimately, it comes down to, I'm reminded of the old adage, two wrongs don't make a right. There can be no doubt that what Obama has done and continues to do is wrong. We all know that to be the case. However, by turning to someone who is equally driven by his own self-interest as the current president, but supposedly on the opposite end of the political spectrum, isn't going to resolve the problems which face our nation. It's not an easy realization to come to, but it is one that we must accept if we're to set about the task of writing the course of our republic. We have to accept that we, the people, are the ones that are saddled with that sole responsibility. It's because we are the popular sovereigns. We cannot expect some messiah to step into the reins of political power and to bring us back from the brink of ruination. Only we, by the very design of our republic, are empowered to do so. What we need, on the other hand, is a leader that will remove the chains and shackles of perpetual government servitude and bondage, thereby freeing up the American people to take on their duty and responsibility of writing the course of this nation. I don't see the New York real estate mogul as the answer to that. I don't think that he understands our constitutional system of government, or if he does, he doesn't adhere to it. He has always thought of himself as a cut above, that the law should cut out a separate niche for him and apply to everyone else. We see that in the way that he recklessly wants to get rid of the public figure exception to our slander and defamation laws. Why? It's so that he can go after those of us who disagree with him, and those of us who have the courage to stand up to him and to say that what he is doing is wrong. You know, that used to be part of the aspect that made America great. We could voice our disagreements. But we are fast approaching a point where we are going to take that fundamental and inalienable right, that fundamental pillar of American polity, away from the people. And we see it through the twisted language, the consistent inconsistency of Donaldolf Julius Caesar Trumpolini. And it's funny. We can see that he has the arrogance to claim responsibility for Ford moving one of its factories away from Mexico to Ohio, but we now see that Ford is once again investing in Mexico to build yet another factory. Why? Well, it goes down to the same type of executive action taken on the part of this Obama regime that is poisoning the free market capitalistic system of the United States. You see, all of these things are interrelated. They must be taken in totality. They must be considered as a whole. And then, when we examine it and analyze it in that light, we begin to understand the true scope and extent of the problems that are currently facing this nation. It is something that is a problem that we cannot ignore. a problem that we will not ignore. Yes, I can see why some would be drawn to Donald Trump. He speaks a very good game when he has a message that's developed for him. And he can claim to be a very successful businessman. He certainly has wealth. He's expanded upon the wealth that was bequeathed to him, meaning handed down by inheritance by his father. And he has a way of labeling and branding that is second to none. Yet the inherent problem with branding and labeling is that it works for businesses. The office that he's seeking now, by its very nature, is not a business. The United States is not a business. Our fundamental and inalienable rights are non-negotiable. Yet, time and again, Donald Trump has gone before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and reiterated that everything is negotiable. Folks, mark my words. If you watched AIPAC, you see that Hillary Rotten Clinton has already used that against him. Should he, by some cruel twist of fate, become the nominee for the gutless opposition party, he will be decimated by whatever candidate the Democrat Party selects. Whether it be Vermont Senator Nerdface Boing Me Sanders, get me a Thunderboy liquor as long as I don't have to pay for it, or Hillary Rotten Clinton, that is an inexorable truth. It's one of those glaring realities that haunts the dark precipices of our mind. But we cannot turn away from it because it is there. And it shows that we need someone who understands the Constitution. Because as both Jeremy and I have said time and again, the key to unlocking all solutions for this country has been with us since the country's beginning. This is not just some fanciful thing that we're pulling out of our imagination. It comes from the Constitution. Think about it. Without rights, what do we have? Truly speaking, without rights, what, pray tell, do we have? The answer is nothing. Without our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, we truly have nothing. We are able to live only upon the mercy of a government. That is the very sort of system that our founding fathers sought to escape. That is why they put in the safeguards of the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, to protect us from governmental encroachments. It is why they gave up their blood, sweat, tear, and toil, and even put their sacred honor on the line to secure liberty not only for their generation, but for posterity. You see, folks, it comes down once again to a unescapable fact of our republic. We must ensure that the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born, are able to exercise their liberties, their freedoms, their rights without fear of governmental repercussions and reproachment. That is our duty. It's our solemn duty and obligation. But I understand that it's very difficult to embrace and do that in a time in which government, via unconstitutional nameless, faceless, and ultimately unaccountable bureaucracies and their overzealous regulations have made it all but impossible to do. In fact, the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs, in his magnus opus, Keynes at Harvard, warned of this all the way back in the 1950s. This is the sort of chaos that the Fabian socialists are banking upon. They are hoping that this is what will drive us apart, that it will tear us asunder, thereby allowing them to replace our system of polity with that foreign and alien notion of socialism. Socialism, wherever it has been tried all throughout the annals of history, has been an abject failure. It is a return to a near mercantilist system where the government itself should control most avenues of business via draconian regulations to such an extent that the individual will is crushed. That is what it comes down to, time and again, folks, that they wish to crush our individual will, our individual desire, and our individual drive to improve our lot in life, as well as our friends, families, and loved ones' lot in life. They decry the evils of greed while failing and refusing to acknowledge that their own wanton drive and desire for power is a more detrimental form of greed. They fail to see that a free market system harnesses greed and puts its energy in motion for the greater good. Of course, this is not the type of message that you would hear from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. It is not the message that is being taught in the various institutions of education throughout America. That is because these sources, whether they be the information media outlets or our schools and universities, have been infiltrated by the twisted machinations of Fabian socialists for well over half a century. That is part of the problem. It is the root of which these seeds have been planted in the body politic of the United States and are threatening to take root within our society, poisoning the up-and-coming generations, and, if left unchecked, even those generations yet to be born, with these doctrines that have no place in an open, honest, Republican society like that of the United States of America. Again, it leads us back to that inescapable question of how do we fix the problems facing our country? Having said all this, the way we resolve to fix the problems currently facing the nation is a difficult question. It can often seem as though we don't even know where to begin. The argument has been made that the system allowed things to get this way. The problem with this point of view is that it takes away the responsibility of the true wielders of sovereignty. The only way the system can fail is that the people allow the government to ignore the Constitution and act in an unchecked manner. Of course, that's what we've seen take root in this country over the past century and a half. We have seen it incessantly march towards greater governmental autonomy and authority in direct contradiction to the strict, clear, and concise language contained within the four corners of the Constitution. But, sadly, that is the reality that we face. I don't blame the people for what has happened, but I do think that we are the ones who are charged with safeguarding the system in order to ensure that it functions properly. As such, we are also the only ones who will ever be able to bring the system back from the brink of ruin. This is not the message that the Fabian socialist types want you to hear. They purposefully try and divide us so that it is easier for them to enact their destructive policies. This is why we must return to strict adherence to the Constitution. If you want to fix the problems that currently face our republic, the answer has been with us since the inception of this country over 230 years ago. That key is none other than the United States Constitution itself. And when you stop and think about it, division harms us. Thinking about the current state of affairs in America, I think we can all conclude that a major problem that has harmed the conservative movement is division. Yet the division has been foisted upon us by a claim of false unity. This is another area where Donald Trump raises significant concern. He has frequently crowed that he is a great uniter, that he has brought fresh blood and new faces into the Republican Party. The problem is, as can be seen throughout social media, that a vast majority of these supposedly new Republicans are actually Democrats who have temporarily changed their party affiliation to ensure that the candidate they think least capable of defeating the Democrat Party's ultimate nominee will clinch the GOP nomination. It's a twisted, warped mentality. And Donald Trump is refusing to see the reality. In many instances, his followers, his most ardent acolytes, are failing and refusing to see the facts of reality. And it's troubling that Trump has, in essence, become the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives throughout this great republic of ours. Because if you stop and remember what the Pied Piper was originally hired to do, it was to rid the city of rats. But when the city elders and aldermen failed to pay his dues, he played to rid it of their children. What that was really alluding to, in the form of analogy, was the future of that city. And that the Pied Piper claimed to do one thing, but when it proved to be too expensive, too costly to pay the fees and dues he asked, he moved to destroy them. Do you think that Donald Trump would do anything differently with our system of polity? Has he at one time, other than when directly pressed, mentioned the Constitution or claimed that his adherence and allegiance is directly rooted in our Constitution? For the life of me, I can't think of a singular instance where that has happened. I have not seen him root his plans in the Constitution. Now, sure, on his website, he will put up plans, obviously drafted by someone else, to which he alludes to the Constitution. The problem with that is that we're not hearing it directly from him. And that if he is unable to articulate that to the base of the GOP, then he is clearly going to be unable to articulate that to the general electorate. That means that we would, should he become the nominee, be facing an uphill battle, an uphill slog the entire way. It means that the challenges facing this nation would become all the more untenable, and ultimately it means that the spread of anger would continue to spread throughout this nation without any sign of relief. And that would do one of the most terrible things that could be afflicted upon any society. That would be the crushing and destruction of hope. Because he is making all of these absurd promises. And through conviction of character alone, he would have us all convinced that he and he alone can resolve the problems of the United States. But that goes against our nature. It goes against our identity. It goes against that great inheritance and birthright that we have, the Constitution. It is not a radical position to desire that the Constitution be strictly adhered to by all levels of government once again. It is not a fundamentalist view, a radical point of view to want to see the laws of this nation adhered to. But we see from the very admission of Donald Trump himself that he wouldn't necessarily follow the law, or that he would implement the law in such a draconian way as to alienate huge swaths of our population. That cannot proceed. Because once again, it would be the fulfillment of those two-dimensional caricatures that the left always, continuously, incessantly attempts to typecast the American right with. That of this phony war on women. That of this phony war on poverty. All of this garbage that they work up, where they try and claim that the American right are diametrically opposed to the hopes, desires, aspirations, and dreams of the little guy. Now, what does that infer? By the very contrapositive of what they are saying, it infers that they care, that they are the enlightened party that cares for the plight of the ordinary. It's all a bunch of bunk. It's all a bunch of lunacy peddled towards us as if it would somehow form a cognitive ability to proactively solve the problems. Yet they are the very ones, through their reckless policy, that created the problem in the first place. This is the inescapable reality that faces us time and again. Time and again it faces us. And you can see from this the tyranny of false unity with respect to Trump, where he's saying that he's bringing in these new people and that it will make us all work together. He's trying to make it seem as though he alone can revitalize the condition of the nation. He even said that only he can stop ISIS. This isn't some comic book scenario, folks. The dangers we face are real. And he is assisting the left through his reckless style of delivery and insulting mannerisms. If we are not careful, as I was just warning, he will fulfill the stupid caricatures that the left draws of the right constantly in this country. Such stupid notions as, once again, the phony Republican war on women. Ultimately, the only real war that is occurring in the American arena of politics is the war on liberty and justice. And again, it calls upon us, the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, to shake ourselves from this slumber that we have allowed ourselves to fall into, to realize that our fundamental and unalienable rights are in direct jeopardy. that everywhere we turn within this once great representative republic of ours, we see the twisted and malicious forces of tyranny, despotism, and oppression at work, and that they are doubling down on their efforts to deprive us of our very sovereignty. This has been the dark machinations of the Fabian socialists that have been working in incremental fashion nonstop for well over 100 years. When we stop and realize that these are the dark problems that we face as a nation and as a people, we come to the realization that what we need is to return to basics. I know that that is something that I have oft times repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer. Yes, we must return to sanity. We must make America smart again. Now, that's not to say that we're arguing that the American people aren't smart. No, it's the system of government. It's the electorate, not in and of itself, but in the way that blind fury has shut down their mental faculties. We need a return to logic and reason, because raw emotionalism in its nature is manipulative. You can easily manipulate it. It becomes malleable like putty in the hands of a sculptor. The problem is, I'm afraid to see what dangerous sort of thing that Trump would sculpt, what twisted machination he would unleash upon this republic, because he seems to act like a narcissistic and petulant child. But we've already seen the results of 2 terms of a current wielder of the reins of political power in this nation who is a narcissist. It has been detrimental. It has worked against us. It has pitted American against American, and it has made the future of this country come into doubt for the first time in living memory. That is a truly horrific reality. It means that once again we must embrace our national character, heritage, spirit, and identity. And that in and of itself is a difficult task, given the great extent to which these Fabian socialist and historical revisionists have indoctrinated the minds of generations of Americans. We're seeing it play out in the way that the current college age kids are seeking safe zones on campus, and in the way that they selfishly attempt to deprive those they disagree with of their fundamental and unalienable right of freedom of expression. This all has its roots in a twisted and dark philosophy that should never be welcome in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. These problems unfurl before our eyes, and they show no signs of improving any time in the foreseeable future. And it explains the anger, yes. But again, we must not allow that anger to control us, to drive a wedge between us so that we are divided. Because this is the tactic of division and conquer that the left is banking on. It is what will empower either a Hillary Clinton or a nerd-faced Bernie Sanders to do whatever they want. And mark my words, folks, what they want is to continue and even accelerate the sort of negativity that has been foisted upon us, the sort of destruction that has been foisted upon us by the current regime occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. These realities lurk like shadows amongst us, driving us into an untenable situation in which we start to look for scapegoats to cast the blame upon. Ultimately, that does nothing to help resolve the problems that are facing us. It doesn't strengthen our position. It doesn't provide us with a platform in which we can defeat them. And to truly defeat them, we must do so in the marketplace of ideals, which should not be difficult. Remember, folks, that this election cycle was ours to lose, is ours to lose. But if we entrust the reins of the party to a reckless soul like Donald Trump, who, according to a former manager of a super PAC that he closed, that manager being Stephanie Sigiglik, or Chigiglia, or however you pronounce it, she said that he didn't really want it, that this was all about an ego trip for him, a way to expand his popularity, a way for him to use that to bolster himself. Again, folks, that it does not speak well for the country, for finding real-world practicable and workable solutions. It shows that it is another man driven by ego, another man who would put his self-aggrandizement above the interests of the American people. We have suffered through that enough already as it is, through these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. And those results are beyond repute as being disastrous. They are disastrous because they have taken the very lifeblood of America and drained it. They are planning to sacrifice our system of polity on the altar of despotism. And if we are not careful, we will play an active role in inviting, encouraging, and even allowing it. Again, we here at the Wright Flyer will never deign to tell you how to exercise your fundamental and inalienable right to vote. There's an important election decision that will be made today or tonight in the Badger State of Wisconsin. To the good people of Wisconsin, I ask that you apply a constitutional framework when analyzing the candidates to determine which you think is best suited to be the nominee of this party of ours, that is the only litmus test that applies. Now, I have explained in the past as to why we have chosen to endorse Texas Senator Ted Cruz, but I'm not going to tell you to vote for him. I just ask that you apply the Constitution to the other candidates and then make your decision accordingly. That is the great spirit of American polity. That is the way that we should unite and encourage one another. We shouldn't just always be attacking each other, but that's the problem with Donald Trump. With the greatest amount of zeal, he attacks his rivals within his supposed own party. And yet he has not yet attacked the Democrats. He's even said that he has not yet begun to attack the Democrats. That is part of the problem. It shows that he is like Oliver Cromwell. A response to an untenable situation that faces a country and its population. A response that is not well thought out or planned. A response that threatens to boil over, destroying the very political definition and system of that people and of that nation, and it resulted in an even worse tyranny. That is the last thing I want to see play out in this great representative republic of ours. I want to see us all empowered. That has been the mission of the Wright Flyer ever since we first started. It is a mission that we will never depart from, that we will never abandon. It is why we are the new resistance. No matter what, we will stand up for the truth. And remember, folks, that the truth has no agenda, that the truth is there merely to set us all free. And freedom is the natural yearning of humanity. It is that unquestionable tenet of the human condition which has been with us since we first bonded together in forming civilization. What it comes down to, then, that we should do is empower ourselves with our Constitution. Folks, we bring this information to you so that you can empower yourself. That's the beautiful thing about the United States and our political system. It's designed so that we can all be empowered with the truth. By accepting our role as popular sovereigns, we wield far greater power than we could ever imagine. Think of the great achievements that our founding fathers managed to accomplish despite all the adversity they faced. The task that is before us is not a simple one, but nothing that we have undertaken as a nation and as a people has ever been simple. We are rugged individualists. And that is the true, inherent character of our DNA. We shouldn't ignore the voices that warn us of governmental tyranny, because those are the very voices that gave life to this nation. Those are the very voices that inspired our founding fathers to drive forth and create this longest lasting constitutional representative republic that has ever been seen in all the history of the world. And think about that, folks. That is quite a marvelous accomplishment. It is not some small feat. It is not some passing political fad. It is an undeniable, concrete truth and reality. We are the beneficiaries of that great birthright, of that great social contract that is our shared Constitution. We are the watchmen that are to protect it, to ensure that it is viable for the up-and-coming generations and for those generations which have yet to be born. And we are the ones that must see it through. I am confident that the American people will do the right thing, that we will stand up for, advance, promote, and protect, and ensure the viability of this representative republic for generations yet to come. We have faced many challenges and adversity in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. We have overcome them because of our ability to see the bigger picture. And we see that bigger picture now. I think that that is part of the reason why we're seeing Donald Trump slow down. Let it be the case that we took our solemn vow here and now to promote the ideals of freedom, liberty, truth, and justice, that we didn't turn our backs on that great inheritance that we have received by right of birth or naturalization, and that we, the great ultimate wielders of sovereignty in the United States, have preserved liberty yet again. That is what we are called upon to do. That is what our founding fathers would expect us to do. And I think that's exactly what we will do. We cannot escape it. We cannot delegate it. and we damn sure cannot negotiate it away. This is why we say that not everything is up for negotiation. Some things are non-negotiable, and that includes our fundamental and inalienable rights. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to take this opportunity to personally thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have either here on our YouTube page, our Facebook page, or our Google Plus page. On top of this, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationX. Folks, that's all one word and all lowercase, @RadioAviationEX, @RadioAviationEX, one more time, @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists both the personal Twitter accounts of yours truly and my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will also find our blog spot page where we do post some insightful things from time to time. And you will also find our Cafe Press account. Now, I do encourage you to take a look at some of the trinkets and goodies that we have available for purchase there. It has our logo and also a first-class passenger logo. And it's on drinking glasses, hats, caps, shirts, apparels, bags, pins, watches, clocks. You name it, it's on there. And every little bit goes to help us continue to bring this show to you and to continue to empower you as we have vowed to do. With that said, folks, do take care. It's a pleasure having you. Hope to see you next time. See you later.